Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of brand new Cherry Flavor, the new Netflix limited series. If you haven't watched the full series, come back to this after. For the meantime, you can watch my spoiler-free review that is also on my channel. But we're going to be breaking down every episode here, talk about the whole season as a whole, so make sure you finish it first before you watch this. So getting into this felt like a limited series that kind of came out of nowhere for Netflix, and the trailer intrigued me because it looked like something different, something that might be targeted more towards a niche audience, which I think this definitely is, and this is going to be a polarizing show where I feel like you're going to see some people who hate this show, but that's just because it maybe not their cup of tea. But I think you'll also find people who really love it because it is their cup of tea. I think it's very important to who this audience kind of gets out to for it to succeed. But I was excited. I love this actress of Rosa Salazar. You see her in a lot of animated films and shows, like you know the face, so it's cool to see her kind of in real life doing a real life role. You got the great Catherine Keener, who's in a similar role that she's always good at, like she was in Get Out, and Eric Lange, who you might recognize from another Netflix show, Unbelievable. He was actually the detective, so he's unrecognizable here. It shows the range this actor has. So we'll see with episode 1, it's a lot of setup, but it's important setup, it's effective setup, and it's really delving into a timely story, even though it takes place in the 90s. And this being based off a novel, it's interesting how they tuned it well to the times, and it's another type of Me Too story here with a Predator producer to this film director, aspiring director. And you know, this is a story that's very relatable to a lot of people in Hollywood and getting taken advantage of. And what I did like was that they kind of did a good job to show you how it happens. And it's really well done because you're seeing a lot of stories are showing these kind of stories now, but they did it in a way that was clear. Like, oh yeah, this is a believable way how these situations come about, why someone feels the victim in that situation, and what the bad intentions are, and how someone takes advantage of being powerful, like this producer played brilliantly by Eric Lange. But what I did really like about this first episode was that when she is betrayed by him, right? When Lisa Nova, our main character, goes back to him and is like, I want to hear you say it. She just doesn't even want an apology. She wants to know what changed. Where you were my mentor, we were going through with all this, going to have this movie made, and clearly we're going to get that payoff now with that line in the finale, which I really appreciate. I love when things are planned out that well, and you get that feeling like you were paid off as an audience to get that answer from Lou Burke. But, you know, that's what we'll get out later, where he's like, in the finale, that it made him feel small. That when he put his hand on her leg, she rejected him. And this, again, explains intentions of why people do what they do, and not justifying it, but showing you why this happens and why it hurts people and how these messy situations come about. So I think they did a really good job at that. And they did it in a great dressing here of this like David Lynch-esque vibe, but where I'm so myself about David Lynch, what I think they did great with the David Lynch vibe is that everything that was weird here and odd and strange had a purpose in the story. It was justifiable. There was a reason. It wasn't being weird to just be weird, which I will say sometimes with David Lynch I think happens. And you're obviously going to get a kind of John Wick vibe. This is based in a revenge story. So right away in this first episode, set that up. She is on this revenge, and she meets Boro, who is played by Catherine Keener, and she's like this witch, but really she's that storyline of making a deal with the devil. But what hooks you in a first episode like this is that they give you stuff that's new and unique, and maybe this story can be similar at parts to other things you've seen, obviously, but having her puke out kittens, you know, having a different type of mysterious character in the Boro, and that Catherine Keener puts a different spin on her to make her own. I like that. I think there is something here that keeps you intrigued because you feel like you're getting something that was trying to be out of the box, but in a good way. So I think the first episode, it's a lot of setup, so it might not be the most entertaining, but I'm going to give it an 8.6. It's an effective premiere. So we go to episode 2. This is where the horror vibes of the show really starts kicking in. It doesn't really happen in episode 1, but episode 2, you're like, oh, okay. And little stuff set up already here, even in this episode. Like, we learn that Lisa's mom left her, you know, as a baby, which we'll get to in payoffs with that. But I like that they blended humor here well, where it didn't take away from what was happening and the seriousness of it all, but it added, you know, and complemented. And I like that she needed a photo of Lou, but a pinch of his pubic hair. And I love how they just talk about getting this pubic hair throughout the episode. It added that humor to it. But I love, again, this horror coming in because we first see this entity figure that looks like something out of a Guillermo del Toro film, which was really cool, and it had cool like creature vibes and sounds to it. I really like that. It's like the psychedelic horror you get throughout this show, which I thought was effective. And the lighting in particular was great in the show. I love how they use the colors of red throughout, and we see, you know, being cherry flavor of this show, but you see the character Lisa's always wearing red until the end when she changes, which we'll get to, but the lighting is expressing her mood, which I really appreciate. And what's really good about the acting here across the board for Rosa Rosa Salazar as Lisa Nova she is a different level of talent because she just has it, like she has that presence on the screen. Like, I think she's worthy of saying she's a great lead, and it was good that she could show it off in the show. But I thought one of her standout scenes when she was actually, doing this ritual with Boro to make the connection with Lou. I thought it was really well done by Rosa here, and it's a good cliffhanger having see that Boro drinks the blood of the kittens and her pupils dilate, so it works for that Netflix type of binge. And they add intrigue now because you're sort of trusting Boro and you're not, and having the characters in the jail tell Lisa, like, don't make a deal with Boro, it's a bad history, already gets you like, okay, who is the villain in the story? Who is the good guy? And that was smart how this show went about, where they eventually get to a point where it feels like Breaking Bad, where this character Lisa you sympathize with, you do less and less as it goes on, and she kind of breaks bad in her own way, and it will serve the theme well, and it will become an anti-hero story, again, which we'll see as it goes on. But episode 2 I thought was really good too, and again, bringing that horror and effective humor, I'm giving it an 8.8. Episode 3 is the shortest episode, 36 minutes, but this is where the revenge really story kicks in now, and the character of Lou starts getting these hiccups at the bar again, which I liked. It was like a good villain tick for a bit too, that it's just giving him interest as a character to watch and him have to hiccup through everything, and that he kind of slowly gets a little bit of good graces from Lisa because he's talking up her film to these producers, but again, she can't trust this guy. Turns out he's totally betrayed her and is showing her film at this party. But I love especially the lighting in the scene where when she gets that anger, the red lighting comes over her, she's going through a red hallway, she's in this red dress, and it actually leads to one of the best scenes I thought on the show. Was this very tense scene with her and Lou, and she's trying to get him to, snort the coke with the worm in it. And by this point, I'm just very impressed by the directors working on the show, creators, the writers. Like, this is something that's different. It's an exciting team of talent here, and I'm excited to see what they make next. But I was impressed. Like, I was like, okay, these are good writers, good directors. They're following just basics to make something at least decent, and they're going beyond decent here, which I thought was really cool. And there, you could see they're trying to make something different. But you start to see that anti-hero thing start to come into play a bit, and how far is too far, where when she's staring down Jules, Boro's behind her, and he lights on fire at the pool. Again, this was her friend who betrayed her, who took on the movie, and you start to wonder now, is she going too far and going down the deep end? But I'm going to give this episode an 8.2. Wasn't as good as the first two. Again, it might just be hurt by its length and how short it was, but still good. Now, episode 4 is where stuff starts to flip, and things you thought were happening are changing, and you get to see that Boro is not this good person at all, that she really is a villain by nature, and she's really got no side in any fight with the people around her. She just does what helps her the best in true witch form. We see that the problem with Lisa's deal that she made is that to get revenge on Lou, it's not in the clean way where it would just hurt Lou, it's hurting people around him, which she doesn't want to hurt his son, and it goes to extremes where it's affecting people she didn't think it would affect. This was my favorite episode of the series, though. It has so many moving parts to it, and Lisa's getting sicker and sicker, so there's just tension built throughout the episode, and it leads to this great eerie basement scene when we first go through the trap door, and she finds the loose eyeball, which we'll eventually learn was Mary's eye, the actress, and we see the first time the lady with the ripped out face, which we'll know later on is a form of her mother through this jaguar, and it was all scary and terrifying, and I thought that was really cool to see. I love little details in the lines too, where you see like basically at Lou's house everything's going crazy with these animals, and he's like, you're stressing out the falcons that he loves, and he's like, they're elite predators. Of course, the elite predator himself saying that. And arachnophobia alert, because I am a fellow arachnophobiac. That giant tarantula, oh my god, that freaked me out, and we saw a lot of it, so fair warning. But yeah, then Jonathan gets this like killer erection from the spider bite that was even hinted at by Lisa earlier, but just to the wrong person. Now, where I think this show is going to be polarizing and it gets just really, weird, but I liked it. I think that's what, if you're watching the show, it's what you want, right? Is when we get this crazy body horror, which was a sick scene to me when the kitten was coming out of Lisa's side. We get this sex scene with her and Roy, and he's like putting his fingers in the side where the kitten's coming out. So that's the scene I think will probably turn people off who aren't into the really extreme weird stuff. Like, this is what I'm saying, it's very niche. I think that's something that will probably tune a lot of people out, but if you're into it, you're like, okay, we're going full here. So I do appreciate that. I thought it was cool. I mean, it's craziness. Like, that's what this show is, and it was embracing that. And I love the character of Roy because, what makes shows a lot of predictable now is that, like, every single guy in it is a villain, or he turns out betrays the lead female and he's bad. This was a case where it was showing you, okay, there's still some, good guys out there. So this was a good guy in Roy, and I think they stayed true to that. And I felt that was a breath of fresh air because it took away from, worrying like, oh, he's just going to turn bad. And it took away from it being predictable in that sense. So I liked that. I thought that was nice, and they did a good job in building the relationship with her and Roy. And one of my favorite humorous moments in the show is when, he's like, you're just producing kittens now, and they're in this motel, and the guy just shows up, the zombie motorcycle guy, to just take the kitten. And she's just like, yeah, he's just taking the dead IO. I just thought that was great, and how it was delivered by Rosa herself so casually. But what really got me excited when we actually see Lou shows up to Boro here, and they have this kind of showdown and testing each other out, but it's two great actors working together and just works so well to me. I will have a little complaint though. There's a lot of convenience. Sometimes they cheat in the script. Like, it does get ridiculous at a point that anyone can just walk into Boro's place at any time, even though she's doing these crazy things. Like, it just could have took one person to call, anyone, the police, or even just you could burn this witch hut down if there's all these awful things. Like, it's strange she's so open to it. And then when they actually come to get Lisa at one point, Lou and Mary, that they are blocked off and they have all these zombie guards, but most of the time she just doesn't care. I just thought that was inconsistent. And that even goes to, there's a line they'll show in an episode or two coming up where, Lisa, we find out she's living in this apartment building alone, but no one else lives in the apartment building. So it's like, that's a convenient way to get away from trappings of people seeing what's going on in this crazy apartment. Is kind of like, okay, but I don't buy that there would just be a way for her to live in an apartment building all alone with no one else. Come on. But that's nitpicking. But episode 4 was my favorite by far. Again, everything was clicking, so much happening, and it was all really fascinating. So I'm giving that one a 9.2. Now, episode 5 is where we really go into Boro and, learning all about Boro's past, but also she sees the character of Jennifer, the body she's taken over, the family she left behind, right? So we learned this family was looking for her for 10 years. I did think it was strange that the husband we meet had no ecstatic reaction to seeing her again in the first time in 10 years. He was just like, oh, hi. That was so weird to me. I didn't think that worked. I didn't think it made sense with the kids because they didn't really grow up with her. They were too young. But with him, it was just strange how they had the character and actor react to her for the first time seeing her in 10 years. And like I said, you're going to see scenes that are really odd. Like, basically, Boro, poisons all of them at the table. Not too strong, not to kill them, but to make them forget everything. And she does this brain surgery thing to make them forget. And that could be seen as really weird and just to be weird, but it's not. It's still serving the plot. It makes sense for the character of Boro to do something like this. So that's what I thought was really well done by the show, and probably the strongest thing, because a lot of times people just do weird stuff to be weird, but this show really knew how to make it all count and have a purpose. And it's so awful and mean what Boro does because, Jennifer's former family doesn't remember each other when they wake up. So it's sad, It's cruel. But a really another standout scene acting-wise was between Lisa and Lou when he comes and yells at her at the hospital what happened to her son. And you're starting to see the gray start to really happen with Lisa, and guilt hitting Lisa of again, Jules, even though he sucked for taking her film, he doesn't deserve to be basically paralyzed, and Jonathan did nothing to her, and his life he's dead basically. So, all this stuff's kind of hitting her now. I thought this scene was really intense and shot really well when the henchman goes to kill Lisa and he beats her up. He's an awful henchman, though, because he doesn't actually check he killed her, because he didn't. But Jonathan's watching. It's really cool. He's, creepily watching from down the hallway, and the lights are flickering. And again, just amazing acting by Rosa here. So I'm going to give this one an 8.7. Now, this is where my criticisms come in. Episode 6 and 7, I did not really like of this show, which was surprising, because usually shows get better as they go on. But I thought 6 and 7 were the weakest. I think this episode struggled a bit, because we get a lot of exposition, which is important, of Boro explaining her past with this jaguar. It's a little hard to follow, but again, fine. It's a lot of telling. Maybe I would like to see some of it, but again, fine. That's hard to pull off. But something about it just didn't click to me, thinking it was the best way to present this information, with her just telling her while, Rosa's just laying in this milk hot tub, basically. And then even the story about the peyote in the woods with Mary when they filmed it. I wanted to know more, too, about what was really happening, or see more what was happening with Lisa here with Mary when she was actually filming her in this peyote, both of them, and her freaking out and cutting her eye out and keeping it on film. I wanted to see a little more to it and get to know a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit more about Lisa in this time frame. But we do see they were lovers here, but this is the first episode that felt silly to me. I mean, even Lisa, when she's eating this henchman, there's not much reaction to her eating this henchman, and even to herself doing it. Like, I feel like they kind of left that away and never came back to it. And this felt a little generic and cliche, this episode, where Code really takes on the only sensible one here to set up his death paying off more. And you really do like Code, and I really like the actor of Code. I thought he was a great character too. But it just felt like they're trying to get rid of this body, and it kind of just felt like it slowed up a lot of the momentum here, and that felt like something you've seen a lot before. And even Roy just saying he's gonna leave her now after all this stuff, like, really fast. A lot of character moments were rushed in this episode, and in a way, it also felt slow too and sloppy. So this one just felt off being as tight as the previous episodes. And then episode 7 being a penultimate episode was a disappointment, because that's usually when shows are at their best. But this is where I got annoyed with this plot they threw in, where the uncle of the henchman who got killed is on his quest to get his revenge with a machete on Lisa. I don't even think this was necessary. I do think this was a plot trick that he was to get Lisa into the basement and get things set up in the finale, where at the same time you could have done other ways. Like, why even have his character be another sector of this story? I thought it was distracting. Like, who cares? And why I'm going to give props to the actor so much, Eric Lange of Lou Burke, is somehow this guy we've seen done awful things. He's not a good person. You still sort of feel for him when he's with his son in these scenes with his son. I did like those scenes at the restaurant in particular, and that's all acting there. So props to him for that. And what I didn't like in inconsistencies here is that we see the sex magic, the blood magic needs to happen. It makes like this omelet with all that she has to eat to get rid of this poison in her from licking the toad. But I did not understand, maybe I missed it, but when she went in the basement, she sees the woman who's her mother, aka really the jaguar behind all this. You know, they mentioned at one point, oh, and the poison's gone. She didn't eat the omelet, so how did the poison leave? That was confusing to me. I felt like that was a cheat. But this is where Lisa's really, you know, her character grows a bit, because she says, I feel like I traded his life for my movie, talking about Code. So losing Code was effective. It was a big part for her character, and really Code was her soul at the end of the day, even over Roy. And for her losing Code, she knew like she was too far gone just to get what she wanted with her movie and revenge. And even it didn't really make sense that in this basement there's a red door that you think was going to maybe go in a different time or different area, dimension, but it just gets her out of conveniently the basement so she doesn't run into the henchman that got her into the basement. So that was sloppy too. It was just like, okay, this is just a red door that's conveniently in the basement that gets you out of the basement. So that was strange. And I thought it didn't really land this last part where Roy's like, I won my Golden Globe, meets up with Lisa when she comes out of the red door, just brings her to regular time and regular place, and the henchman's shooting at them from the window in the limo, and it awkwardly just ends the episode. I was like, okay, that didn't really get me excited for the finale. It was decent. So I'm going to give the penultimate 7.4. But now we go to the finale, and I was worried because it was like, I felt like the show was dropping off a bit in quality, but then I thought this was a really strong finale, which made me really happy, and it had a nice bow on it. And I mean, what's better than opening episode with Catherine Keener talking to a couch? I thought that was great. You know, it's the white jaguar. I thought that was just one of those moments in cinema you just love to see. But we see Lisa at the top of this episode. She's still on her revenge path. She's like, first I'm going to kill Lou, and then I'm going to take care of Boro. And I thought this really worked well, the scene with her showing up to Lou's place, because Lou's begging her now just to kill him, and he thinks she just wants him to apologize. But what really paid off into this whole story was what was set up, like I said in the beginning, where she's like, no, I just want you to say it. What changed? What changed from us having this team making this movie? And he admits his pathetic ways, that he felt small when she basically rejected him. So I thought that really paid off, and it shows she grew, because by her doing all these things to get revenge on him, at the end of the day, she pulls this worm out of his eye, but she spares him and lets him live. So that comes around too when she visits him in the hospital, and it shows a growth in her character, in maturity, and seeing what she's done, a self-realization that she went too far and did the wrong move on this. And that getting what you want, because he's like, are you happy you got your movie back and all these people are hurt around you? It's like, no, it doesn't bring you what you thought. And you see too, when Mary is now buying time when Lisa shows up to Boro's for Boro to really take care of Lisa here, she's like, you just used me in this film. You pushed me too far. I took my eye out and you kept it in the film, which is the worst thing. Out of all these things Lisa did is just awful. Like, keeping on the film for her own success. So she's got a dirty past as well. She's not this innocent person you thought in the beginning. And that's what I think works so well in the writing of this character, our main character Lisa, because it's showing you by the end of this, everything she did from what we knew about in the beginning was different from what we knew about her at the end. And that it shows how far her character has come, because she already was doing messed up stuff before all this stuff with Lou. So she came to this self-realization at the end, and she left her film in the apartment, and she's offered everything she wanted from Alvin, the producer, and she's gonna direct. And that's what she originally wanted too, but the change was when she realized not to take that call and take the lunch with them to get the actress, and she goes home on what really should matter to her, and finding herself and not wearing red anymore and walking into this white into Brazil. I thought that really landed and worked well, and it pushes that lesson of the story, which you've seen a lot before, but I think it worked because we really liked the character of Lisa, and then you had that Breaking Bad feel of that anti-hero where you start going like, ooh, I don't know anymore, and then you learn more about her from the past you don't like about her, but you see a character that grew and changed and got what they needed in the end, and that's what's really good with writing is, you know, she wanted something, she wanted revenge, but at the end they got what they needed, so not what they wanted. So I thought that was, you know, really, really great. And let's just say, the best moment body horror-wise and gore was when they ripped Roy's head off. That was insane. And I was like, okay, now we know where we're going, because they're killing everyone here around her. And it was effective with her crying. Great performance again by Rosa when she saw Code and his one eye and dead, and he's a zombie now. All these people's lives she cared about, she ruined. And to just top it off, that cherry, no pun intended, was with Roy's head getting ripped off. Now, what was really interesting to me was, this is a limited series, you know, we'll see how the reaction is by people and how well it does on Netflix. But they wrapped it in a nice bow, but they left a door open because we see Boro took over Mary's body. And now Boro is in Mary's body, so they've left the villain of Boro the door open. They could do another story for sure, so we'll see. But they've definitely wrapped this story of Lisa. So I thought that was interesting, but if they want to make another series of the show, maybe they do like anthology, but with the character of Boro as this witch. So that could be cool. But they definitely left the door for a sequel if it does really well, I think, for sure. So a strong finale as a whole, I'm going to give it an 8.7. That brought my score up. But the show as a whole, I'm going to give the show as a whole an 8.5. I think it's right, just that B. And I think the best part about it, it's different. It had a nice bow to it, a strong theme, again, about just taking revenge too far, and it keeps the world spinning the wrong way if we all just try to do bad things to get back at someone who hurt us, instead of just trying to grow and do it a different way, because then you end up hurting other people. You just keep the chain going. I think that's what the show was definitely pushing at, and it was shown really well through this character of Lisa, but that she could change and grow and realize what happened here to herself from her past, and then in this story we see it, and then to her come around by the end. So I really like that, and I think that it is niche. Like, it's going to be polarizing. Again, come on, him putting his fingers in that side of her where the cat came out, you know, that's going to be one of those just polarizing things. You're either in or you're out at that point. So, again, I think you're just going to hear so many mixed opinions about this just by bias, though, of like what you're into. But if this is your type of cup of tea where it's weird, strange, and it's, you know, pretty horrifying, and just, I think the best part was the good writing and the great acting, of course, and just stand out for Rosa, Salazar here. But that's also, you know, Eric Lange and Catherine Keener also did great. So you had 3 great lead performances. So I was impressed. I didn't have high expectations for this, but I really liked it. And I'm interested to hear what you guys think. So let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment and try to respond to as many as I can. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews. I do celebrity interviews as well. And if you really like what I do here, I'd appreciate if you could sign up for a membership. You can just hit the join button. It will help me do this full time one day and get more stuff out for you guys. And please follow me at Steve Varley Show on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.